If I didn't ride blade on curb, would you still love me? If I minimized my net worth, would you still love me? Keep it 100, I'd rather you trust me than to love me. Keep it a whole 100, don't got you, I got nothing. From a one brother Kendrick Lamar. And welcome. The scent of the evening is pumpkin and farm apple. I almost said pumpkin and fun apple. I don't know. I think that sounds like a really great smell too. All right, I literally barely.
Hello.
You see how well that just worked?
How are you? It's like magic.
Magic. I'm good, ladies. How are you?
I'm glad to stop moving.
Obviously wonderful.
Always wonderful.
Good.
I mean, I don't know. This morning I was.
Yeah, the weather here is kind of gross too. So.
Well, I just feel like that's the nature of being a human.
Yeah.
It's just, a lot's going on.
Yeah.
In here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I'm so glad you're here, Steph.
I'm glad to be here.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. So I am Stephanie. I am from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I own the Dignified Dog. I've been I've been a certified dog trainer for 12 years, going on 12 years. And I prefer my pet dogs because there are a lot of pet dog owners out there. So behavior is the thing that I like best, but I do a lot of puppies as well and reactive dogs.
How did you get into that by the way that lots of people get into it? They had a dog. And
well, I've always had dogs, but I actually wanted to be a vet ever since I was a wee little one. And I know that you used to be a tech, so I love that. But yeah, I used to want to be a vet, and then I kind of got to a point where I didn't want to go through all of the crappy parts of the job. So I also started to see that dog training was starting to get popular. And I don't know why, but I never thought that was really a career. But once I realized that that was kind of more along my vibe. And so I wanted to do that instead.
So you play with dogs all day?
Oh, yeah, you know it.
What generation are you in?
I'm a millennial. 92.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah.
I'm an elder millennial.
Oh, yeah.
Almost Gen Xer. Almost Gen Xer.
I like to say that I have the mentality of a Gen Xer, but yeah, I'm 92.
Yeah, it's a cusp thing.
Yeah.
So the reason I asked that is because you mentioned that you didn't know it was a career to be a dog trainer.
Yeah.
And when I was 19, I took my first obedience class with my little wiener dog, Tanner.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, so this lady, she had corgis, I'll never forget. I'm like, she just does this for a living? That's funny. I just thought it was the most bizarre thing. I'd grown up around dogs, but it was just more working situations. And then I got, a dog that he didn't want to have a job. Okay. Yeah. He wanted to sit up on his hind end and wave and eat sausages. It was mostly what he did. And he was great at obedience. He loved it.
Yeah.
That was my first look at a woman that was because I knew a lot of women vets. I had seen women vets before. Well, I wouldn't say a lot, but by that point I'd seen them, but definitely not dog trainers. And I know, I'm from a smaller state where there's less population, but so it when you said that, it made me think back to what was that like for me? How far we have come, to what people's general knowledge about a dog trainer is. Now it can mean, a lot of different things.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like I said, I've always been into dogs. I was that little kid where I played outside and stuff, but I would read dog breed books for fun, really familiarize myself with the breeds, and I'd be out and about and seeing all the dogs and asking people like, oh, is that a this breed, and is that a this mixed with a this, and people would look at me as this little kid and go, how do you know what kind of a dog I have?
I used to do
I
that.
even had this.
Forgot about that. I used to walk or ride my bike to the library and read every single Dog World episode, because there used to be monthly magazines that would just be
Dog Fancy.
Dog
Yeah.
Fancy, Dog World,
God.
everything, the AKC Gazette. Who reads the AKC? I read the advertisements in the back of the AKC Gazette. Like
Yeah.
so memorized the stuff. I was so passionate about it, even as a high school student.
Yeah.
Man, the last time I did that. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say one of my friends in high school got a dog from a pet store, but there were times where she would bring him to school and she would have me babysit him on my spares. So I would just walk around school with this little chihuahua in my sweater.
That sounds heavenly. Yeah. Oh my God.
So even in high school, people knew me as the dog girl.
Oh, yeah. I gave, I'll never forget, like, I always, when I talk about this, I always hope that one of my friends from like back home is watching. But in 8th grade, I was in current events class. It was an elective. My teacher's name was Mr. Anna Schott, and it was out in one of those little like outbuildings, like not, you know what I mean, that was separate off away from the school. I don't know if you guys have them where you live, but they have them in the Midwest. And I remember walking up to the ramp every day, and he would see my face on report day, and he would know whether or not I had picked another dog breed. And by the end of that class, everybody in that class, I mean, they already knew I was like weird about animals, I think. Yeah. I mean, I think that they did, or that was at least how they found out. And I also had like chronic nosebleeds that year. So I'm like up at the front giving a report on the Canaan dog. Like, if that's not foreshadowing the future. It was brutal. Like, I don't know what I was trying to put those children through, but he's like, Jerri, dog breeds are not a current event. I would disagree.
Yeah.
I just kept doing it and doing it. And by the end of the class, by God, it wasn't a current event because we all knew, you know? That was also the same year that OJ was on trial and everybody was watching it from around the world. And so that class was just, I don't know. It was a wild time. But I remember that if you're a certain age above kind of, if you were at the age of accountability or such in the 90s at all, you would have to remember learning in that way. You know, you would get a book, you would get a magazine, I mean, oh my God, the back of the Dog Fancy where the breeders were, I would just, oh my God, I would mill over the million reasons why we needed a Shar-Pei, why we simply must have a Shar-Pei, and I got one parent in.
Yeah.
I got one parent in. And then my mom was like, both of you are idiots. No. And then that was the end of it. And you know what? As it normally goes, my mother was right. And it would have been a nightmare, and we would have, anyway. So, but I love that. I have not talked about any of this stuff for a long time, as you forget how much you really had a genuine curiosity as a young person.
Oh yeah, and like I used to play, like kids would play video games like Mario and stuff like that, and I played those video games too. But like the computer games that I had were like vet tech games.
Yeah. What was that?
Yeah, the one game that I had
was missed out.
Yeah, it was this realistic game where you were in a vet clinic, and it was all kinds of animals, from dogs to cats to lizards to snakes to ferrets, and they would come in with the problems that those animals get, and you would have to diagnose them, and you would have to do surgeries on them. And
get out of here.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm glad I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it was on my days.
That's awesome. What a great way to get a sense of a career.
That was called?
It was called Vet Emergency 2.
She remembers what it was called? I would have been like, I don't know.
Yeah.
emergency too. I'm putting that down. I'll tell you
Yeah,
what, I learned
memory of an
something.
elephant over here.
Wow. Oh my God.
Stephanie,
Computer game.
There it is.
in
Very
the
cool.
years you've been in it, have you seen a change in the dogs, the kinds of dogs that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, of course, everybody's got doodles now, and so that's kind of like the breed, but the breed. Um, but yeah, there's well, and I guess even more so the way that people train dogs and the way that people see dogs has changed. Because of course, when like we were all younger, dogs were dogs and they were outside, and we trained them when we had them because we didn't think that they just learned everything on their own. But it seems like now people expect that a dog is just going to figure it out all on their own. And
Do
of
you
course,
think there's a
millennials. Oh, go ahead,
do
Jerri.
you think there's I want to stop you there and ask this. Do you think that there's a relationship to that and just to their approach to life in general?
Yeah,
That things just like happen for us?
yeah.
Okay.
I think a lot of people
Yeah.
have that expectation that things will just happen, and I am a believer of it is what it is, and what happened, like whatever happens is meant to be, kind of thing. Um, but there's just certain things like dogs where they're not going to just pick it up. You might get that unicorn dog where they just figure it all out. Like, how many times have all of us probably met people where they say, oh, I wanted a golden retriever because I met one when I was a kid and he was just the perfect little angel.
Yeah, without seeing
Um,
any of the background that the adults probably put into that.
yeah,
Yeah.
So
that's
how about the
probably
temperaments? Do you see
Mm.
more reactivity, less reactivity, the same? When you see 5 puppies, are the proportions about the same, or are you seeing changes?
I see a lot more reactivity now
Mm-hmm.
than I used to when I was younger in the 90s and in the early 2000s. And after the pandemic, especially, I noticed there's a lot of anxiety underlying in all of the behavior problems.
Yeah, a lot of separation anxiety, a lot of
Yeah,
isolation
yeah.
anxiety. Mm-hmm.
And of course, it probably comes from us as well, too, because when we were um, quarantined away, of course, everybody got anxiety.
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic that we haven't even talked about, Denise, is now that we're X amount of years out, we can look back at the kind of ramifications thus far of COVID and of lockdowns and of the mass kind of exodus from the workforce to work at home jobs. And to me, at first it was the COVID puppy thing.
Yeah,
And that time has passed now because those dogs have grown up.
yeah,
And now what I'm seeing is a lot of separation anxiety.
yeah,
Like like people legitimately not understanding how to create space between them and another sentient being.
yeah,
And I notice there's sometimes a lot of correlation between the way they parent, what their boundaries are like, what they allow in the home that the children do,
yeah,
and then that will somehow be reflected in the way that they deal with the dog,
yeah.
and then it's very interesting to me.
It is.
I also see a lot of breeds. I I mean, I maybe knew one person that had one other person besides me that had a pit bull when I was younger, and they were like me. Their dog went everywhere with them. It was, or like one guy had one, but she was like what we used to think about. She was mean. She was like tied on a tire. I don't know,
Yeah.
but for the most part, it wasn't very common. Um, and now I feel like everybody has them, and they're
Yeah, well,
living in cities and things like that.
I saw something that you posted like earlier this week too, and you were talking about how you had to have a chat with a guy who moved into your neighborhood who had a pit bull that he just kind of had hanging out in the front yard.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like there are still those people out there. I actually have a woman that lives behind me who has too many dogs, I will say. But since I moved in here, she's had little dogs, and she recently got a doodle. And she, I believe, is Polish. And she likes to leave her dogs outside, and they bark all day. And it's interesting because I understand that in a country like Poland, they still have the mentality of dogs are outside.
Yeah.
But again, this dog is not learning anything. And we live next to a school as well, and she's not socialized either. So when the kids are on recess and when the kids are off school walking past and everything, this dog is just losing its mind. And so, yeah, when I saw you talking about that guy the other day and how you had to try to figure out a way of how to approach him and tell him that you're looking out for him, but this isn't really how we do this here. I've been kind of trying to figure out the same thing.
If there is some grand benefit to what that person is doing, I try not to infringe upon people's culture. If I'm like, oh, I can see why you're doing that, you know, like, okay, but there was nobody in this town's going to break into that man's house. You know what I'm saying? Like, and not because his house is not as nice or because because this is a tiny little town in Kansas. There's no crime here. You know, it's just not one of those things. Very low crime rate. And because of the kids walking by. The kids walking by bothered me because that was goat fencing, and all it takes is a little bit of unmanaged arousal, and before you know it, there's kids being tackled into the street and ran over by cars. And I mean, it just was, I could just see all the things. But had that not been the case, and had there been, you know, okay, man, do you? Because I recognize that cultures are different and people come from different places. But yeah, like if what you're doing becomes unsafe for the community that you are wanting to be a part of because you live there now, somebody in the community is going to say something to you. And many people had said something to him, but I also recognize that, you know, this is a town of mostly white people. They really don't have a lot of well, if any, experience living around Black people. They just don't, you know, just because of the way Kansas is set up and the way the towns are. So I knew that they probably had done a real humdinger on the way they like approached him and tried to talk to him about it. And, you know, so it's interesting. That's a very fine line. How can we honor other people's customs, cultures, the way that they may view a situation without putting Denise's like, I'm going to say something about it, without what am I looking for? Without putting our gloss over it, our layer of our veneer over it.
Yeah. And also the assumption that we're right. So that's complicated, right? Because you go in and you say, well, we don't do it that way. The implication is because our way is better.
Yeah.
And that's tricky because if you're a dog trainer and you are observing these things, dog outside of a fence with goat fencing, or person who chooses to have a lot of dogs, keeps them outside, and you're watching the dog's behavior deteriorate, you're actually coming in more as a dog trainer. But the thing is, it's not perceived that way. And it's always an issue when you come into a situation. How are you coming in? Are you coming in as a dog trainer or as a cranky neighbor or as somebody who wants everybody to live like them? So to me, the line in the sand is always safety. If I think there's a safety issue, I might get involved. I might not. But if there's no safety issue, it's like, But even something like barking. Now, I just accept that dogs bark. I don't love it if I have a neighbor with a barking dog, but I won't do anything about it. It's just like, it's a dog. And some people they just think dogs bark, so they don't, you know. But then you guys have next door, Redwood City, next door, Wichita. I don't know if you got that up in Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, if you hang out on next door, there is one thing I do know, and it's that people really don't like barking dogs. I mean,
I don't. I'm one of the people that
oh my gosh, they will get in on this conversation, go on, and next thing you know, you would think they were like hanging that dog over a pit.
They're gonna poison it or something.
Yeah, because they're like, this is so abusive. It's like it might have just been a one-off. Like somebody went out for the night and didn't know. Like I tend to be. I mean, it's not that I like it. It's just I accept it. But I was talking to my friend in Brazil, and he said, here it wouldn't occur to anyone to tell their neighbor to stop their dog from barking, because it would be like tucking your cat not to meow. Like it's what dogs do. They bark.
If you don't like it, don't have a dog, kind of thing.
Right. You know, like birds.
It's like
in the
children at a restaurant.
Birds in the
If you don't like
They
the
make bird
sound, then
noises.
don't go to a family-friendly restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
And
why some restaurants have like the lounge versus the
Right.
restaurant.
Yeah.
Right. So it was interesting because it was like, well, you have birds in the neighborhood. You didn't pick them. They make noise. Oh, well. You have dogs in the neighborhood. You didn't pick them. They bark. Oh, well. I just thought that was really interesting that there was a much more accepting view of dogs as dogs.
Yeah.
But I could also see if I wasn't a dog person, I might not love that.
Yeah.
Sophia, if you're still here, say what you mean by that. Sophia lives in Brazil. She lives in a village called Ipatinga. Village. She said to me one time that it was a village, and I was like, "What do you mean village?" And she's like, "Well, it's like a city, but little towns are more tolerant." Yeah. I mean, I think as far as where I live, if you have space and your dogs are barking and barking, well, we're not close enough to hear it, you know?
Yeah.
But for me, when you move into, next door to a police officer who's breaking multiple city ordinances because of his barking dogs, like I get real weird. I get real upset about stuff like that, because I think that if we're going to have rules, then they have to be for everybody. Otherwise, we'll just not have them. And I'm okay with that too.
Yes.
I'm okay with that too. Other people may not be okay with that, but I'll be able to conduct myself properly. I promise. So it depends on the situation when I'll say something, but if it's impeding, like infringing upon the way that I actually have to live my life, make money, get sleep, things like that, I will say something. But I always go to the person first and try to talk to them first and just explain the situation.
Yeah.
Because to me, common sense would tell you not to put your dogs out at 4 a.m. and let them bark until 7 a.m. because it's the early hours. People have
Those curfew
babies.
hours.
People have, yeah. I mean, to me that makes sense, but that has to do with a lot of stuff. How I was raised, my occupation, blah blah blah, and it's not common sense to a lot of people. Like you were saying, she leaves her dogs outside because that's what so it's really not, I think, about common sense. It's about what's your perceived norm, maybe. Is that maybe the way to say it?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But that totally makes sense. So when I was a kid, I wouldn't say like everybody's dogs ran the neighborhood, but a fair number did. And a fair number of dogs did get out. So this is going back a ways. And some of them were just out a lot. And I remember my neighbor just felt dogs shouldn't be cooped up in a house. For him, it was actually a conscious choice that dogs must be loose, being dogs.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't at all unusual to be walking home or whatever and see a dog. I mean, it wasn't like dog packs, but a dog here and a dog there. And then that really changed dramatically over the last however many years, right? So now you just don't, I'm sure it depends on the neighborhood. And admittedly, where I live in the country, there's a lot more of that. But where I am in the more city type place, and dogs they don't run loose in the suburbs. Not in my area for sure.
I would almost say the opposite for me. Like back when I was a kid and I lived in the city and everything, it was not very often that we see off-leash dogs. And it seems like more nowadays, there's off-leash dogs all over the place every day. And like people losing their dogs and dogs going missing. And yeah, like I think I can recall, well, and mind you, like I would go see my cousins who lived in a small town, and everybody it was more of a hamlet, and everybody there would let their dogs roam because same thing, like they all had the mentality of like, yeah, dogs are dogs, they should be able to have freedom, not be.
Do you think that it has something to do with, I think this is one of the variables. Well, you said it the other day on something, Denise, I don't remember what we were talking about, but how dogs, like, it used to be like, dog, this is your yard. Yeah. If you run outside this yard, I'm going to help you kind of stay in the yard a little bit. But if you run outside this yard and you get hit by a car, you're going to die. And then I'm not going to have you anymore, okay?
Yeah.
That was literally how it was.
Yeah.
And the only reason that I got good at training my own personal dog is because I lived in the country and I was terrified my dog was going to get hit by a car, and she went with me everywhere. And so I was like a helicopter mom. She's with me all the time, and I would let her do stuff. But if I didn't know any other way to train a dog than to tell him no and to be nice to him.
Yeah.
Tell him no when I didn't want him to do something, do a lot of repetition, and remind them what they were supposed to be doing a lot, and just be nice to them and take them and do cool stuff with them. I don't know. I mean, that seemed at the time, and it worked for me. But that mentality now, when there was a shift because I think it became this. If you let that happen to your dog, you are irresponsible. You are less responsible than I. Therefore, you should not have a dog.
Yeah.
Somewhere that entered into the zeitgeist and changed something. It's
Yeah.
always these layers of self-righteousness. Somewhere they fall like little parachutes, like little spider webs through the air, and they get you in your face. And it actually has this huge effect, and it changes a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I so like seeing people with dogs, and this is a complication because some of the people who I see with dogs, homeless people, for example, makes me happy because they have a friend.
Yes,
and there's
me
also the
too.
question of quality of life. The dog's quality of life is actually, in my opinion, high, even if it's not in the sense of veterinary care or high-end food. In terms of an enriched and somewhat interesting existence, I would say it's on the high end.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I agree.
But I also recognize that veterinary care might be hard to come by. The dog may be covered in fleas. There might be things of that nature. And so I'm interested in these conversations when I see people having them about, well, then you shouldn't have a dog, because I do, and I'm super clear about this, I prioritize people over dogs. And if having a dog significantly improves the quality of life of a person, even if they don't meet the standards I would like to see for all dogs, I still want to see them with a dog. But I think for some people, a dog is pretty much the equivalent of a child. And in the same sense that you probably wouldn't want homeless people to have their children living homeless with them, right? I mean, you don't want to necessarily take it away, but you don't want to see that. You want to get them in a shelter. You want to interfere. And I think that's just interesting, depending on how you see dogs and the rights of dogs. Or like Jerri was talking about, the guy I was talking about lives in a small town, and this is current, 5-6 hours away from me, up north, kind of a little more woodsy. Gets a dog. Either the dog figures it out or the dog doesn't. Dog is somewhat loose, front yard. By 9 months of age, if it's still alive, it's probably going to make it to old age because it figured it out. If it didn't, it didn't. Like he didn't seem to get too worked up over the process, the winnowing process of how it works. I was kind of listening and just honestly kind of like disbelief, like, wow, that's a radically different approach. But it's certainly not unheard of from the past. And I do not doubt there are many, many, many places around the world where that's still pretty standard. I mean, there's lots of people who the dogs are basically street dogs that are owned.
Yeah.
So the dogs do go to somebody's house and get fed, but they're not, but that's kind of like incidental.
Yeah.
The dog just
one lives right here. I have a couple viral videos with him. His name's Rusty. And you just catch him any given day, just trotting on down the road. He likes
and
to
people
follow
feed
his
them
owners halfway into town,
fat.
and he sees them off.
Yep.
Yeah, and sometimes if he can catch a ride back, he will.
Yep, I knew one.
Otherwise, he'll find
when I
his
was
way.
a kid too. Yep, when my cousin's Hamlet, there was one Ziggy. He was supposedly a low content wolf dog. I love that dog, but yeah, he was just a roamer. Nobody knew really who he belonged to. He just there was one
But
house.
he was clearly fed.
Food.
They get fed. People like them. It's almost like a wild animal that's not wild.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not rounding up all the critters in the world, like all the birds and all the rabbits and all the raccoons, because something could happen to them. We just sort of accept that wild animals often live close in to people, like coyotes and such, and they just live their lives, and probably some of their lives aren't so good, and some of them probably do okay until they die. But we are so, like, dogs hold such a different place for me, for sure, and for so many of us, that it's almost become like we can't really visualize that some people might see them more like the other animals that live in our society.
Yep.
That, raccoons do become friendly with people and eat from them and come every day for a little.
Are straight up the most
Have you seen the reels occasionally of that one guy who has a coyote just coming and hanging out on his property from time to time?
God.
Yeah, I can't remember what he's named her and everything. I think she's wild, but like he leaves food out for her, and he sometimes leaves his house door open, and she just comes and goes as she pleases.
Oh, Lord in heaven. I don't encourage people to interact with the wildlife in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to put little feeders out and the deer come up and stuff and you watch them and don't touch them, oh my gosh, my boyfriend would have a heart attack. Like,
some of the
that.
videos I've seen, like,
touch that. Oh,
yeah, like
he'll
be out hunting and she comes up to investigate, and she's just grabbing his hand and biting him, and he's just giggling away about it. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Whatever floats your boat.
Have you had your rabies shots? Because
Maybe a tetanus shot here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I
Steph,
think
tell me
that
something.
coyotes are majestic.
How much work will your average client put in to help their dog and their behavior? Like, what do you see? Put some numbers to it. Give me some percentages.
I would say the majority of my clients put in the work. There's a small handful of clients that go above and beyond, though. Like, I get the clients too that will occasionally shoot me a text and they'll say, hey, I know you gave me this and this for homework, but I decided to do this and this. Is that okay? And I'm like, well, is it working? And then they'll say, yeah. And I say, keep doing it then, as long as you're not doing anything bad to your dog. And then they'll show me when we see each other next. And if it looks good to me, then I tell them to keep doing it.
So how much time do you spend with an individual? Like weeks, months? Do you have people that just stay for years? What's the situation?
I like to do weekly visits with people, and usually I'm around for an hour because I don't want to just exhaust the crap out of their dog, and I don't want to overwhelm their brains either. And I always tell my clients the biggest thing is, like, once we finish up our training, that doesn't mean that I'm done with you or that you're done with me. Because of course, like, this is just the tip of the iceberg kind of thing. Whenever you need me, I am here. I'm kind of your therapist, more or less. Every time you need a therapist, just book a session in. And so
I kind of like that. And do they do that? Will they show up 3 months later?
Honestly, like, I would say within the past 2 years, I have had a lot more clients, like previous clients who I've wrapped up with, contacting me again and saying, hey, I've noticed that this has popped up, or like, hey, we're starting to see this again. Can you come and see us? And I really like that, especially too, because I'm always learning new things. So I probably have something new to show them too.
I like that because it shows not only commitment to the dog, but commitment to the process of a dog trainer. Like, you don't just skip from therapist to therapist. You find the one you like, and then you see them. So I like that they feel they have that person in the background. If things get a little dicey, they know who to call. I think that's very cool.
Yeah. And I do have a couple of clients where I hear from them almost every day. And it's funny because they'll say, sorry, I bug you all the time. And I'm like, you're not even bugging me at all. I would rather you shoot me a text when you have a question or whatever, rather than sit there and struggle and struggle.
How much do you find that people take advantage of that open and easy access?
Yeah, let's talk
Less
about
often
that.
than
I would love to talk about this.
Yeah, less often than I used to. And I think it's because I have also tried to establish boundaries. But occasionally from time to time, I will get somebody who will message me, like, past business hours. And it's okay if it's past, like my business hours are 10 to 6 in the week. And it's okay if it's like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. But when it starts getting into like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, I'm starting to be like, okay.
Maybe this could have waited, sweetie.
Exactly. And I also have to, sometimes I consider as well too, like, a lot of my clients are mothers, and so they might not actually have time until 10, 11 at night when their kids have been in bed. But yeah, it doesn't happen as often as it used to. Because when I was more fresh to training, especially as well when I started out on my own, conveniently enough, I decided to go off on my own in 2020. That was more when people were abusing it. And I think it was just because also with it being COVID, everyone was stressed to the max.
Right. So you could be both a therapist and a dog trainer.
And it's funny because before I graduated high school, I debated maybe being a psychologist or a therapist.
Me too.
Yeah.
I actually thought I was, that or a college professor for sure.
Yeah.
So I used to worry a lot about being taken advantage of and boundaries and people asking for help and all. And it's not that it never happens, but it's a lot less common than I might have thought it would be. I think I worried about something that's not really a problem. And when it comes up, it's very easy to address it, like on a case-by-case basis. And I remember talking to a trainer some little while ago who also travels and teaches. And I asked her about that because I used to have a rule when I traveled. You could catch me anytime. From the moment I walked in the building, I could be eating, lunch, I don't care. Dinner, after dinner, I don't care. as long as I am here for this weekend, you got me 100%. But when I go home, that stops.
Yeah.
So you can't email me questions. You cannot continue. And so I was talking to my friend about that, and she said she lets people email her afterwards. So I was super curious. Like, I said, do you find that becomes a problem? And she said, it's really, really rare. Like, somebody might email one question from the seminar, but she says it's almost always just a simple thing. You answer it, you move on. Very unusual for someone to start turning it into a, when my dog was born, he had a short tail. And I think that influenced the fact that when he was 3 days of age, he get this noise. Because some people, my God, they do the whole life story.
Yep.
They give you everything you could possibly want and that you didn't want. But she said it was really rare. And I've started to think that maybe people have a better acceptance of boundaries than maybe I thought before I started worrying. So before I worried about it, now if I get somebody who does that, well, first of all, I have an online school that's way more comprehensive than what I can give you in a quick answer. Yeah. So usually I have a resource and I can tell them, here's a really good answer to your question, not an off the cuff 1 paragraph answer. And the second thing I have is access to an alumni group of students who love to help people with just about everything. And so I tell them, I can give you a 3-sentence answer, but if you want a really amazing discussion and conversation, I want you to bring it to this group. And you can post anonymously if you're feeling uncomfortable. And what happens is I find that because my group is very well moderated, so things stay above board. I find that in those group conversations, the answers are a lot richer. They go beyond what I might have thought of. There's a lot more dialogue back and forth that I don't really have time for. Yeah. But maybe that's my form of boundary setting. But it's just interesting that I think I was worried about a problem that didn't actually come to pass for me. I don't know about what other people's experiences are, and I'm always kind of curious about that.
Yeah. Well, I have a client only group on Facebook as well too that my clients can do. Like, it's for the exact same thing. And even like when it comes to like the after hours asking of questions and stuff when people are texting me, it depends on the question as well. Kind of like what you said. Like if it's a quick little like thing about like potty training, like accidents in the house or something like that, like sure, I can shoot you off a quick answer about that. But if it's in relation to like something deeply rooted about behavior, then I'm going to tell you that we can book a session or we can discuss it upon our next session, or call me in the work hours and we can discuss it then.
Mm-hmm. Right, because it's one thing to say, can you give me a tip to get my dog closer? It's another thing to say, how did you teach healing? I mean, it's like, well, or 2.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Well, I have been talking to my clients every single day, Monday through Friday. I used to do it every day, 7 days a week. But then at some point I was like, this has to stop. Yeah. So I've been talking to my clients every single day in an open workspace where I've given them no instructions on the number of questions they can ask, what they can, I have told them that I have a program that I've figured out. And it was a lot of trial and error of what is really necessary for me to teach you to help you right now, and what's just things that we might like. Yeah. Because we got to because I do the same thing as you, and people come to me with serious problems. I'm not concerned that they want to run off leash with their dog on the beach at that moment. Yeah. I want to get down to the other stuff. But what I have found is if you communicate in the beginning that you just stepped into my boat and I'm Willy Wonka and we're going down this tunnel. Yeah. That period. That's it. If you don't want to be here, get out of the boat. Yeah. Because this is what it is. I can recommend you to another trainer that has a different style or this or that or that. Mm-hmm. But I promise you that I have spent years trying to figure this out so that it is the very best for you. And I'm going to bring that, and sometimes it takes a while because it's so much like human communication based. Yeah. But I'll tell you guys my hack that I figured out. I used to be really specific about boundaries. I would get on people if they, were talking and talking and talking. I would say something to them. I would be like, you're getting off in the weeds. You're this or you're that or you're whatever. And then one day, this woman that I don't even watch anymore because I don't like her, but she said something that I did like. She was talking about men. And she said, when a man does something I don't like, I do nothing. I just silent. But then when he does something I like, I reinforce that behavior. I was like, so I started trying it, and it works. And then I started trying it on my clients. So when they would go on and on and on, and I would tell them I was doing this, they'd be like, I'm so sorry, because that's part of the thing. If I don't tell them, then I'm not really addressing that they're getting lost in the weeds and giving me too many war stories and whatever. But I have a way that I do it now, and then there's a lot of finesse. I came by it honestly. I let them go on and on and on and on and on, and I read the transcript, and I can start to tell their pattern of communication. They'll talk for 2 or 3 minutes about nothing relevant, that they just need to get it out
to somebody.
Yeah, so I scan through it, I speed read through it, boop, halfway through, they'll go, okay, so here's my question. And then I can read what their question is. And if it's somebody who I find prickly or their personality, I'm having a hard time with them, I never listen to their video. I always read what they've written because my ass will get defensive. And it's completely taken that away. I get to the question, I go, oh, okay, yeah, I can answer that. I know the answer to that question. I am capable of answering very simply and concisely without all this other stuff around it. It has completely changed the way that how I'm not sure the word, my ability to reach much faster for empathy, for coaching skills, for support and encouragement over all of the negative stuff that's like abrasive about my personality.
It's like reading between the lines.
Yeah, because now it's not about the way you said it and the way you looked and the way you were genuinely asking me a question and you're clearly confused. And if I take all of that away, I can see that the question was simply, am I supposed to keep doing this out here?
Yeah.
Or it's a person who watches a lot of stuff online and they are legitimately asking why this person is saying this and this person is saying this. And oh my God, I used to hate that so much because I really couldn't actually explain it.
Yeah.
So I'd get defensive. I would make up, I don't know that I was making up stuff, but I was certainly
pulling shit out of your ass.
Yeah, that is the best way to describe it. Yeah, I was doing that. So, I don't think that they take advantage of it if you recognize all the reasons that they're doing something. And if somebody did take advantage of it, let's say I got in there and they left me 17 videos. They're going to notice pretty quick that I'm not listening to that shit. I'm not doing that with you. Like, what do you need to know? And tell me, because you're spiraling these videos. I know from experience, you're spiraling out. It's just such a much more honest way of like communicating. And I just let them know, like, hey, it's okay that some of the things that you're asking me are hard, because they'll say like, I'm not trying to be whatever, I just don't get this. And I'm like, it's okay. I have this way that I do it. I don't even watch your video. I just read what you said. And then my attitude, which is large and in charge, is not going to get in the way of me trying to help you. And they're like, huh, okay,
yeah,
cool. And then we just move on. Yeah. I used to not do that. It was so embarrassing.
Well, there's also the issue of communication style. And I remember I used to work with someone, and I learned more after the fact, because it's actually, what's the word? It's not a communication style. It's sort of in the ADHD type realm, but I don't know what it is. She doesn't have a choice. In order to communicate, she must create all of the scenery before she can get to the point. It's painful for her, and if she doesn't do it, she struggles. She gets very anxious. It took me a while to kind of figure out what was happening. Now, the good news is all of that landscape really did pertain to the topic. It's just that it was far enough away from what I was focused on that it took me a long time to figure out. She actually was giving me a lot of great detail. The problem for me is that as a listener, I have the opposite style, which is quick, get to the point, move on.
Get to the point.
There's a phrase phrase for that. Don't tell me about the birth, just show me the baby. That's what that is.
And then I want to ask questions. So I see the baby. Then I ask, how was the labor?
Yeah.
And then I ask, you know, that helps me. I'm a question asker, and this person is a teller.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time staying focused.
Do you know
I get kind of
a lot of that is, Denise, that what that might be, because you, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but because I think this is relevant to everyone, the neurodivergent thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people, especially women, are like they're auditory processors, so they have to verbally hear what they're saying to make it all happen.
Yeah.
I did not know that for a really long time.
I have a lot of
neurodivergent
friends, and so that is something that I have been learning myself as well too.
Yeah, like they legitimately cannot work through what you're really trying to teach and say until they say all the things that they're thinking out loud. They hear themselves saying those things, and then they have time to process all that stuff. That's really interesting to me, because I find that about myself a lot. We do it with our friends, right?
Yeah.
I just need to talk this out.
Yeah.
And then boom, 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 and then, you're fine.
Yeah.
Well, Jerri and I will do that. We'll be in a private conversation, and one of us will just say, I'm just vocalizing, and I don't know where I'm going yet. I just need to be talking, and eventually it kind of is almost like, oh, yeah, thanks for your help. Like the other person didn't say a word.
Yeah.
It's just, you needed somebody on the other side, because you almost have to hear yourself out loud to make sense of it. I mean, I never paid a lot of attention to the neurodivergent thing. I would say I'm pretty smack dab in the middle of the ADHD world. When I was growing up, that's not something people talked about very much. It was mostly associated with exceptionally high energy, hyper boys, almost never girls. They didn't really understand the form of ADHD, which is not hyper, so just attention deficit disorder.
Yeah.
So basically you sat there being polite, and then you couldn't pay attention, which was me. But mostly I would get myself a book, and I was just going to sneak a peek. So the teacher's telling me things, I'm bored because I understood that part. So then I start reading the book. But unfortunately, 45 minutes later, I actually did miss the rest of the conversation when I actually should have been paying attention. And now I don't know what the hell they're talking about. And as an adult, I learned coping skills because you didn't really have a choice. So there was no medication or nobody was giving it out unless you were way down the path.
Yep.
And I learned a lot of very extreme coping skills that worked for me. And they still work for me. Like I have to write everything down because I can't hold things. So everything gets written on paper if it matters. And then I can relax. If it's not on paper, I'm stressed because there's too many things running around in my head.
Yep.
And I know I'm dropping things. And that's very stressful for me. So everything gets written down. But I still don't think of it as being neurodivergent. And I don't know if this is a generational thing. Like I recognize it as a reality, but I don't identify as a significant part of my personality. Whereas I have friends who almost practically introduce themselves by saying, hi, I'm Denise, I'm neurodivergent.
Their whole
they don't.
It's their whole identity.
Yes, exactly. It's very key to their identity. And it's really interesting for me to talk to them because I realize that it's a big part of who I am, but it's not part of my identity. It's not how I think about myself.
Yeah.
Same.
But I learn a lot by getting these things that they send over. I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. Oh yeah, I got that one. I got that one.
I think it's just on a spectrum. I think there's human beings and there's spectrums of tolerances. There's spectrums of sensitivities. There's spectrums of, I'm like a real vocal, like anti-DSM person. So we could have a whole live about this one day. Because I think a lot of this stuff is just nonsensical, made up stuff to make money, to sell pills, to, just a lot of it. And I have always felt that way and thought that for a long time.
Yeah.
But there's always going to be people that will identify with parts of themselves and lead with that. And I've definitely been one of those people. And I'm learning as I get older and mature and hopefully get some wisdom that I really don't care to be identified as one particular thing because I'm a lot of things.
Yeah.
Like I always try to be representative of Black culture, of women, of single moms, of people that are in long-term recovery. There's like parts of my personality that I am like, that I revere. And I'm like, oh, this is such a big part of being a mom, those kinds of things. But I have found that it cheapens who I am, and it leads with a trailer that may not be accurate for that person.
Yeah.
I've had people say to me, "Oh my God, you're so animated." It's like I feel all these things when you talk because I don't know anybody that talks like that. And then the next person would look at that behavior and be like, "Oh, well, that she's not masking. She's just actually being," and I'm like, "Okay, if that is the way
Sure.
that it makes sense for you okay, that's
Yeah.
fine." My son frequently will walk into a room that I'm in or I have been in, and he's like, "This room just looks like ADHD." There'll be like a dishwasher down, the refrigerator doors open. I have one sock on, and you like don't even know. I don't know, and I'm like eating a banana the wrong way and also like doing
Do
something
you
actually
open a
important.
banana from the bottom or the top?
I open a banana from the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was told that opening it from the top was the wrong way a really long time ago, and also because I watched monkeys
Yeah,
eat it and they flip
apparently
it
monkeys eat it
upside
from the
down.
bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, and they hold it like a handle, and I was like,
Yeah.
well, that makes sense
Yeah.
to me. Yeah, you just pop the little bottom off and
I'm
you
gonna have to
pull out
try
the
it.
little thing.
Try it,
Do it.
Denise. I did try it one day.
It's
It
like a
opens a
candy
lot
cane.
easier.
So much
Yeah.
easier.
Really?
It's
You
so
don't just
pleasant.
stick your nail into the top of the long part and then peel it down?
That's why
Yeah.
I opened
I
it
mean, I
from the
used
bottom
to.
one day because I was like, why won't the top of this open? And yeah, it
And
was
you
a lot
just do it from the bottom.
easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
It's
how do you do
amazing.
it from the bottom? Do you go right through the center?
You
No,
just
so
like you would from the top.
yeah, like the little round, the little brown circle, you just go down the banana underneath it to where the yellow is because it's really thin there.
Yeah.
And you just pop that end right off, and then the little vein comes out with it. And now you got a banana with a handle, everyone. If you remember nothing else
Yep.
from this life,
Oh,
remember
oh well. Okay.
Emily, Mario
This
Kart
is
made more
the tip
sense.
of the day. We should always have one, which has nothing
Yeah,
to do with dogs. How to open a
like the
banana.
Snapple lids. The fun facts that have nothing to do with dogs at
Yeah.
all. Mario Kart made more sense when upside down banana eating was explained.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, there's my client Lila. Well, we are coming. We have to stop before 7, Steph, because it will just cut us off.
Cut us
And then
off.
the
Okay.
end of like the video looks, it's like I just don't know what I'm doing every single time.
We
Banana hack.
were a
Yeah,
little
she
slow to learn,
she
actually.
casually
Like,
dropped the other day that she speaks like 5 languages to me.
who
And
said that?
my client, right here,
Layla?
Lila. Yeah, well, she pronounces it
Lila.
Lila.
Sorry,
Yeah, because
Lila.
I said Layla because it looks like my daughter's, and then I heard her say it, and I was like, oh. But I asked her about her nationality, ethnicity, however you want it, because she lives in Montreal, and I'm learning so much about Montreal and what it's like. It's very scary. The snow is real scary to me. She's like, yeah, we basically live on an island in the middle of, what feels like the Arctic.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God.
Alberta's been
I
Arctic for a few years too,
yeah, and
but this year it's back to normal.
I know that's true because my friend Carly lives there, and she's like, and she moved from Ontario. So, but she just dropped that she's like, well, my mother is Finnish, and so I speak French and Italian, or was like French and Spanish, and I'm like, I just once again want to say that my clients are always so fascinating. They're so fascinating. I learn about where they live.
Yes.
Every single one of them is so different, and they all like really let me in and
Yes.
like let me know how they are. I get to see their kids. I get to I don't know. It's just I don't feel hardly ever taken advantage of by my
No.
clients. And if I did, that moment, I would say something, because a lot of it is unmanaged when people let something go and go and go, and then they blow up at the person. Well, you're just sending me too many videos, or you're whatever. When really in the beginning, had they said something 3 weeks before and just mentioned like, hey, I want to help you find the most efficient use of your time with this. So my videos are capped at 5 minutes, and my clients know it. There is no reason I should be going on and on. Oh my God, somebody shut me up. And they cut off at 5 minutes. And then I'm like, that's it. I mean, I can start another video, of course, but it helps me remember, if I'm concise and I'm like really intentional about what I say, that will be much more reflected in them.
Yeah. Well, it's just like the too long didn't read, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So at my school, the instructors have some flexibility, but basically you have 6 minutes a week, and we strongly encourage you to do 1 minute a day or 2 minutes a day. And people are like, but that's nothing. And I'm like, you know what? If you show me the same thing wrong 18 times, like retrieve over and over and over again, we are not ahead of the curve. If you show it to me right 3 or 4 times, it does not take very long. I would much rather see you show me one thing and just show it to me, and then I'm going to tell you right or wrong, and then we can move on. It's like, it amazes me how much you can get done in a minute or two if you're focused.
Yep.
So you're not practicing it wrong for 20 minutes. And it also, I think, helps people in their own brains to kind of narrow down and focus on what really matters here. What do I really need to show this person?
Yeah.
Every once in a while, somebody tries to get around that by fast forwarding through it. It's so funny because you're like, ain't no way I can tell what just happened there. So they just put it on like times 5 or something.
Yeah.
Like,
And then you're just talking like a chipmunk.
yeah. And like sometimes I'll tell them, I actually really want to see from the moment you got out of the car until, because there's things I'm looking for, right? So from the moment that you got out of the car, I want to see you put the leash on. I want to see you get to the air. I want to see these things. And so then they'll fast forward through it. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't actually work. I actually want to see all of that.
Yeah.
But if I just want to see this one little piece of the retrieve, just cut everything else out, get it ready. And you can show an awful lot in a tiny little period of time.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do too. Because I think it's so much can get done, like you said. Well, we talked about even more things than we haven't talked about before. Like, I feel like every week there's something else and something else and something else. And we will certainly have to have you back because I know there's more in there that you have. So what's coming up for you? Do you have anything you want everybody to know about? And how can they find you? Say it again.
Well, you can find me on my Instagram handle here, or if you're on Facebook, I'm under The Dignified Dog, and there's a picture of me walking a few dogs. I don't have anything super exciting coming up, really. Just hoping for
the cold Alberta winter. You mean?
Oh my God, yeah.
She's
I'm hoping that it just stays normal and that it doesn't go to -60.
Well, I enjoy your channel, and I hope other people follow you because I think it's a worthwhile place to be. So I'm grateful, that you came today. Thank you so much for taking time.
Thank you so much for having me. I would love to be back whenever you guys will have me.
Absolutely. Good. Do you need your screenshot, Jerri? We all got to smile big.
Okay, smile.
Here we go.
Okay, let's see if I can do it right. She's done it, folks.
All right.
Okay,
ladies.
and Renegade the Borbles said, I'm sorry that I missed this. I joined too late. Remember, you can catch them all on YouTube within 24 hours, except for last week when I accidentally reposted Kamal's the spot where Pamela's goes, and somebody like contacted me and told me, and I was like, good looking out. Good looking out. So that's fixed, and you'll be able to watch Stephanie on my YouTube channel.
Excellent. Happy holidays.
Bye, everybody. Yeah, happy holidays to you too. Thanks for